Conference here at the University of Florida. This conference here today has a number of sponsors. The graduate school, the IQ, that's the IQ program. It stands for innovation through institutional integration through innovation. The College of Public Health and Health Professions, the UF Office of Research, and the George Smathers Libraries. Let's give them a round of applause for our sponsors. I am grateful to them for their support and help. By the way, I didn't introduce myself. I'm on the program. My name is Laurence Alexander, and I'm the Associate Dean in the Graduate School. And I welcome you here today on behalf of our Provost and on behalf of the Dean of the Graduate School, Dean Henry Frierson, and on behalf of all of our sponsors. This is a conference which started, just as I said, a couple of years ago, but it started as just an idea, a workshop for 16 people. We started with our Bridge to the Doctorate NSF students to do some preparation for the Graduate Research Fellowship. And we started putting together a program with help with writing, with help with the application and things like that. And we were sitting around a table with some of these partners. And they said, wow, this sounds great. Let's expand this. Let's provide this kind of opportunity for all of our graduate students. And so we did it in a very clumsy way a couple of years back when we started with 16 and about 100 students showed up that year. We were very encouraged. And those students provided some directions to us. They wanted more. They wanted more than just the Graduate Research Fellowship. They wanted something from NIH. They wanted something on international fellowships. They wanted some other things. So the next year we added those dimensions to this conference, and we had 210 participants last year. This year we've added a number of more wrinkles based on the feedback that we've gotten. And we've added sessions for social science, for the DIG Fellowship, and for humanities. We have these additions to the conference. So this year, our participation is around the 350 level. So we're expecting 350 graduate students here today. So we're very grateful for your participation. Why a conference? Why have a conference on this, a mini conference where we're doing this? Well, because the need for funding is great. That's number one. How many of you in here need funding? Proves the point. And number two, because we have the resources here on campus, the faculty and staff and other resources who have engaged in the grant process for years and years and who have been a part of panels and whatnot in judging these works, that we wanted to bring that expertise together with the need and see how it can benefit the graduate students here. So we want to bring together the supply and the demand, the professors and the students, the experienced veterans and the future fellows, the coaches and the players, because we want to put you in position to win. So why now? Why the first week of summer A session on a Friday morning at 8 o'clock. It is encouraging to me to see so many of you out here this early in the morning, let me say. But because, as you know, many of the deadlines for many of the grants are in the fall. They come up starting, I guess, around October and going through late November. We believe that it's time to start moving on that now. It's time to think about it now. It's not time to be competitive in September when the grant's due in October. It's time now to start thinking about everything you have to do and use the summer to put together drafts and revise drafts and revise them again and to put yourself in a position to be more competitive for the grants and fellowships that are available to you and that you're eligible for. That's why now. And it just seems like strategically the best time of the year, actually, to do this. We have, I'd like to just say a special thanks for the folks you see around here in the orange shirts. They're volunteering their time. These are our volunteers who have given of their time to help us to put on this conference. Let's give them a round of applause, please. I'd like to call your attention to just as I conclude my early remarks, on our program today, we have, after our welcome and overview, we have an introduction to the grant writing process, effective written communication. That's our writing session. And then we have a transition and a break, and then we go into our breakouts. And we've got 3 sectional breakouts today. We've got National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowships, NIH Fellowships, the DIG, the Doctoral Dissertation Improvement Grants, the Social Sciences session, the Humanities session, the Ford Foundation session, and we're gonna sponsor those sessions in these rooms, and then we're gonna flip it in the afternoon and repeat those sessions. And as you've seen in the materials, the intent of that is to allow you and enable you to take more than one session, right, of your choice. Some of you may have, in the materials, signed up for only one session. That is, you wanted to get a graduate research fellowship session or the Ford Foundation. If there is space available, you can go to add an additional session, but I ask you not to just kind of walk into the session, but to go to the registration table and get a little ticket to go into the session, because we want to keep a count on the rooms. We want to make sure that those who reserved get a seat in the room, and we want to make sure that all seats are filled and that those who want an opportunity to get into the room can get in. So we want to do it in an orderly process. So please stop by the registration check-in table for that purpose. Then we have another transition and a break after that. Then the student fellows session, they talk about the secrets to their success. These are the winners of these big fellowships. And then we have lunch. We have a boxed lunch available for everybody who pre-registered. So you have a lunch ticket. You should have gotten a lunch ticket inside the little packet. So be sure you hold on to that and use it for your lunch. We will have lunch because we have a large group, and we'll have signs and people directing you to 3 areas. So please just follow their directions to the areas where you can pick up a box lunch and a sandwich. Okay, just have a couple of announcements. You should have an evaluation for these sessions. We ask you to please fill out the evaluations for the sessions as you go along in this day. This is very important to our process of improving our conference as we go, and also important in our reporting processes, both within the university and to our external constituencies like the National Science Foundation. I would like to point out as well, there's a program change, just a slight one. We're flipping the rooms between the NIH fellowships and the DIG We do have signs outside as well directing you to the appropriate room. The recording. Let's see. Recording, because we're recording each session, I call your attention to this. We ask that you keep all conversations to a minimum, turn off all cell phones, or put them in a vibrate position. Lunch will be served in these rooms, 301A, 201. You don't have to write them down. We'll direct you to them. The restrooms are conveniently located in 316 and 106. That's pretty much it for the announcements. And now, I want to stay on schedule as much as possible. Without further ado, it is my great pleasure to bring to the podium our first speaker for the morning, Dr. Paul Duncan. He is a UF Research Foundation professor and is chair of the Department of Health Services Research, Management, and Policy right here in the College of Health and Health Professions. Let's welcome this morning Dr. Paul Duncan.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. You're going to hear later today from people who know a lot more about specific programs, specific application processes, the various ways to get grants in a very applied kind of detail level, and I'm not going to try to supersede any of those comments this morning at all. I want to try to talk to you about, at least from my experience, what this grant business is all about and why it matters, in particular to those of you who anticipate the pursuit of academic careers. Now, I recognize that there are many good reasons to do graduate work and that many of you will not end up in academic careers and may not end up in academic careers that are in the kinds of research institutions where grant expectations are particularly well entrenched. But I anticipate that even those of you who end up in non-academic settings or in the kinds of university settings where grant expectations are not like they are in a place like this, there are such enormous values and positives, both intrinsic and extrinsic, to being even a moderately successful grants person, that I think you should really be considering this. And the time to start is not now, it's yesterday. Because this is a process that you have to learn a craft at the same time as you recognize a transitional process that takes an awful long time. The distance between your first thought and your application and the review of that application and the grant can be enormous, and there is no way to start too early on that process. I'm going to see how badly I can mess up my own slides here. First, some basic framework. I mean, what really are the values that accrue from a grant, either to support your graduate education or in your faculty role at some future time? And let's not pretend anything to anybody. Revenue for your department, for your university, to support your summer salary or to support a portion of your regular salary is a huge part of this exercise. A huge part. But in truth, for many of us, it's not a very important part. The important parts are after the revenue. Academic success is increasingly judged by our grant success, especially grants that are thoughtfully peer-reviewed. The fact that you get one is like getting an article into a really important journal. It is an imprimatur of the judgment of your peers that this idea merited grant support at the state of it being simply an idea. And that academic success measured by your grant support is not trivial. I have observed over, I know as I stand up here and you look at me, I look like I'm a brand new assistant professor who was just appointed last week. But in truth, I've actually been around the block a few times. And one of the things that's been interesting for me to observe is how the construction of an academic curriculum vitae has changed. It used to be that on the top half of the first page you had the appointment stuff, and then the very first thing you led off with was the publications. And that's still probably the case for most of us who are old, like myself. But increasingly, I can tell you that people, if they can't find the grants, if they have to leaf back there to the back to find where your grant support has been, how much it has been, where it has come from, how many you've had over the course of whatever stage is appropriate to your career, you're missing a boat. So I'm starting to see now as a chair, when I'm hiring faculty, that the grants are on page 1 of the vita and the publications and the presentations come after the grants. So it has become a measure of academic success. It is also a measure of autonomy. If you have grant support for your research, you get to do what you want to do rather than what somebody else, probably a chairman, wants you to do. That is one of the pleasures of an academic environment. In fact, that autonomy goes even one step further to genuine independence. Genuine independence. We live in organizational structures. You're going to have a chairman, you're going to have a dean, you're going to have a graduate school dean, and the one thing that you can carry around in your hand and use, this is the first secret I'm going to tell you now, to essentially tell those people to go study, is not your own grant support. Those of my faculty who have their own grant support have a very different conversation with me about their other assignments than those who have less support. Now, part of that is structural. If you get a grant in which you have promised to spend 50% of your time for the next 3 years on this research project, then the university has a contract with that granting organization to allow you to spend 50% of your time on that, and we better, as a university, be able to document that in fact that has occurred. So part of it is straight structural, but part of it is this independence as well that really does allow the grant-supported faculty member a whole set of avenues to have the conversation with his or her chairman about what the faculty member wants to do as opposed to what the chairman needs to get done in that particular year. And then finally, and for me the most important of these values, is it's fun. It is a sheer joy to write a good grant application, to get it funded, and then to do the research the way you thought it should be done back when you first wrote that application. It is one of the things that makes this academic life that you are choosing and that I chose 40 years ago, the joyful place that it really is. And I assure you that that the opportunity to have a lot of fun will increase as your grant support increases. And it might also get you and keep your job. I mean, the reality is, especially in private universities and in the soft money context of grant-supported institutions, your job may literally depend upon your grant support. In the world of health services research and health services delivery with which I am most familiar, I have friends and colleagues and peers at my sister departments all over the country where faculty are fully expected on an ongoing basis to produce grant support in an amount that exceeds their salary, their benefits, the salary and benefits of all of their graduate students, and all of the costs associated with their office and their telephone and their computer and their photocopying. And if they don't do that in this classic kind of soft money environment, they simply don't have a job. Now, there are relatively few institutions where it's quite that draconian, but there's no question that that is the direction of the trajectory that we're working on. I thought I was clicking. So, quickly define a couple of terms because there's great confusion about this stuff, and I'm going to talk specifically about a subset for the remainder of my time here. Grants and gifts are not the same thing. Many people go to universities that have big foundations, that notice the big announcements in the paper all the time that somebody has given $1 million to the university to create this or to create that. That kind of gifting is an extraordinarily important part of our environment, but it's not what we are thinking about when we talk about a grant. Universities often do contract work in my own field, my research portfolio has been heavily invested in state-level contract work doing health policy research. Those are also not grants. They are contracts. Within the world of grants, it's important to distinguish at least among three major subsets, and that is grants that are intended to support activities. In my field, again, this would be somebody who gets a grant to open a clinic, and that clinic is going to serve poor people, so it's not going to get any revenue from the patients. Where do you get the money to open the clinic? You go off to the Ford Foundation or some other major granting agency. Ford is not a good example given their emphasis on international, maybe Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and you ask them for money, and they give you program support money. There are many, many grants to support educational activities at the institutional level, but mostly when I'm talking about grants, I'm talking about research grants. Grants that at this graduate student level would support your dissertation research, or grants that at the faculty level would support that research project that would bring you the joy I was talking about in a previous slide. Even among grants, there are the peer-reviewed kind and the not peer-reviewed kind. And the peer-reviewed kind are better for your academic career success. They may not be as lucrative. They may not be as large in terms of budget amount or as long in terms of years. The pinnacle of all of these, the really, really cool one, is the investigator-initiated, peer-reviewed federal research grant. In the healthcare world, that's the grant that comes from the NIH, or the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality. This is the grant that was your idea. It was investigator-initiated. You submitted it to a traditional study section or similar kind of review. Your peers reviewed it, and they didn't do it gently, and then you got it. And the one little bit of additional goodie that comes with this one is that if you're in a traditional university environment, you get all the positives that come from peer review, come from the fact that this was your own idea, and in addition to that, your institution gets a very healthy chunk of money called the indirect costs, or the F&A, the facilities and administration costs. You may not care too much about those indirect costs, but I can assure you that your chairman and your dean and the vice president for research at your institution care a great deal about those indirect costs. And if you want to go even beyond the pinnacle, have that investigator-initiated, peer-reviewed federal grant be a big one, and have it extend over a long period of time, and have it support a lot of graduate students. That is the one that is really, really cool. It runs your lab if you're in that setting. It produces the data that will sustain many, many papers over a multiple year period of time. And many highly successful academics never get this grant. There is a process. There is a process that you're going to learn much more about in greater detail in the various breakout sessions today, but there are some generic pieces of this process that are important for you to understand. The grantor organizations, whether it's a foundation, whether it's a pharmaceutical company, whether it's the federal government in either the NIH or the National Science Foundation, doesn't matter. The granting agency is going to have rules. It's going to have I shouldn't say clear. It's going to have processes. It's going to have expectations, procedures, forms, and a set of constraints about how you approach them with your idea. It comes as a surprise to many young academics that your own home institution, the grantee organization, also has an arcane set of rules about how you can apply. Applicants need to be aware of both sets of rules, and although there are lots of people on a campus like this especially whose job it is to help you, in the final analysis, you are the one that's responsible for knowing those rules and following them in a way that's meaningful. And I have watched this change from a paper process to an electronic process within the space of my career. I can tell you, I promised myself I wouldn't say the phrase back in the day more than 10 times. But one of my early experiences when I was still a graduate student, working as a research assistant for a well-funded faculty member, was having this event where we ran out of time. We were slapping the thing together, and literally, faculty, graduate students, everybody, were standing at a machine, and you wouldn't know what it is. It's called a collator. It's this rack, 50 slots, where you stack up the pages of your proposal, and then you have to run down the line, take the pages one at a time, and assemble them, put a staple. Right? So at midnight, the night before this thing is due in Washington, we've got 10 people collating. And you know what happened? There wasn't even FedEx at that time. In the final analysis, the next morning, we boxed up this big cardboard box with those proposals in it. And we had a little lottery among our clerical staff to find out which one wanted to get on a plane with the box and go to Washington and deliver that box before the noon deadline at the loading dock at what was then the Bureau of Health Services Research. Knowing that if the plane was delayed, or if you missed the cab, or something like that, and that thing wasn't there at the stroke of noon, months of work was gone. Now, we click send. But you better click send on time, because the same thing would happen. Those rules are really, really meaningful rules. A quick and oversimplification of what this process is going to be like, almost regardless of whether it is a big grant or a small grant, a contract, private, public, doesn't matter. Everything starts with the idea. The fun ideas are, of course, your own. What you think is meritorious, what you think really needs to be considered more thoroughly than it has been thus far. And I'm going to come back to the fact that the idea in some ways is everything. We tend to get caught up in a bunch of stuff about how pretty the application is going to be. But in the final analysis, no prettiness will carry a bad idea. It just won't. Okay? You do fill out the forms, you have the application, you submit it, it will be reviewed by somebody, whether it's a full-blown peer review process in a federal agency or not, doesn't matter. Somebody is going to look at it. And in all likelihood, step 4 will occur. Get used to it. Get used to the idea that you won't, your idea, no matter how brilliant it is, no matter how elegant is your application, it's not likely that you're going to click send one day and get the check the next. In fact, for a huge proportion of all applications, you will get a rejection, and if you're very lucky, you'll get a rejection with some comments and some suggestions and some implication that maybe if you fix those things, next time you won't be rejected. Increasingly, at least in the federal context, your rejection comes with a little note that in very gentle, very elegant, very nice language says, and don't try again. Not with this one. You then put together the second try, and in the happy outcome, you get an approval. Approval takes place sometimes many months before funding actually occurs. And then you begin executing that project that was an idea 2 or 3 years ago. Okay? And it's in that project, if your research portfolio has continuity and you're in an area that allows your career to develop over the course of 30 or 40 years, it's in the execution of that project that you will find the next idea for the next application, and you should be writing it long before you have finished executing this one. So, I'm getting towards the end of my time. I'm going to kind of now spout some silly nostrums or other cliches that might help you. The first and most important of these is decide. Decide if this is the life that you want to live. If an academic environment in which you are seeking external support from other organizations to support your research, your inquiry, is what you want. It is not for everybody. There are people who, for example, so fear and are so intolerant of that rejection that they never submit. And some of them are brilliant. Some of them have wonderful ideas. They have been working on the draft of that grant application since they were graduate students. They're regular assistant professors. They keep working on it. They keep honing it. And they get it better and better. And they never submit it. And it's not because they're bad people or because they're weak or because they're wrong. It's because they have not been honest with themselves in making that decision that this is what they want to do. Second nostrum, start now. Start last week. The two biggest areas in which graduate students can begin this process and begin the career trajectory that includes grant support for the rest of your life are two, and they're really pretty simple. One is apply for grant support for your dissertation research. And as Laurence mentioned, that can be a little bit complicated because by the time you get up to candidacy, at least in the context of our program, and now you have the time and the opportunity to write your dissertation support proposal, but it's going to take a year to get it written and submitted and reviewed and find out whether or not you're going to get the money. So you have to kind of be jumping the gun on that a little bit. The other, and I think easier, better way to start learning about grants and grant support is to get hooked up with one or more of your faculty mentors, and it does not have to be your major professor, and help people submit their grant applications. So instead of simply being that research assistant who's executing the last project, ask your faculty member, can I help on the next application? So that you begin to understand what those forms look like and what an IRB is and how these things have to be connected to your grant application by actually sitting at a keyboard and composing it. And I think for most graduate students, most of the time, if they select a faculty mentor fairly early in their career who's doing this, they'll have the chance to actually participate in the submission of 1 or 2 or 3 grant applications before they worry about their own dissertation application. And incidentally, if you're doing that and you're doing it well, you can help that faculty member take great care to write into the budget the line for the supergraduate research assistant who is going to be on that project and funded by that project and participating in that project for the next 2 or 3 years, and maybe creating the data necessary for your dissertation. Third, develop some patience for the process. It really is arcane. There are too many complicated forms. There are too many parts of it that seem inconsistent with each other. And this applies at your home institution and at the granting organization. If you have, now here comes the technical term, a very low tolerance for the BS, start to work on it. Take some meditation classes or something, because it's there, and you just have to become tolerant of it. Develop a thick skin. You're going to get criticized. You're going to get criticized a lot. You're going to get rejected. In the federal world, in the NIH and NSF world, I don't know what the overall rates right now are, but the pay line is at about the 90th percentile in terms of scoring. So if the grants were all the same size, that would mean 10% of any given batch gets funded. Now, I know just enough statistics to be dangerous, and I don't want to extrapolate that down to an individual case, but that suggests the possibility that you may submit 10 applications for every one that you get funded. That's not a very good success rate. Most of us go to Las Vegas hoping for better than that, but it is a reality of this world. Try to avoid immediate reactions of defensiveness. When you get what we used to call the pink sheets, because they really were on paper and the paper really was pink, now we get them electronically. So when you get the pink sheets, the critical response to your application, the intuitive first reaction is this schmuck reviewer didn't know what I was really talking about, and it's his fault. And you just have to get over that. You just have to get over it. You have to understand that your reviewer read your application. If he didn't understand it, it's your fault. You didn't explain it well enough, or clearly enough, or thoughtfully enough. Don't be defensive, and understand that it's your obligation to describe your idea in a way that is attractive. Probably the most important part of this whole thing, though, is that it really can be a great joy, and you should enjoy it. The world of ideas, of trying to discern something that we don't know, and that it's important that we do come to know it. Convincing other people that they too should believe it's important we come to know it, and then convincing them that your way of knowing it is the best way to do it. These are wonderful intellectual exercises, and they are what will drive the fun of submitting that application, the really cool fun, and less often of getting the award, and then the joy of actually executing the project. Because remember, this started out as your idea. You wondered about this. You wondered, does A cause B? And how can I affirm or disconfirm that basic question, that basic idea? And I think that I will stop at that point, and Kevin will tell me how many questions I'm allowed to take today. 4 questions. 1.
Can you expect that the grant agency will tell everybody whether they've been accepted or denied? In other words, if the deadline, or if they say that they'll pick the awards May 1st and it's May 13th and you haven't heard, is it your responsibility to talk to the agency and say, where are we, or do you just wait, or do you say they didn't take it because I didn't get a notice?
The more formalized is the structure, the greater is the probability that you will know exactly to the day when the deadline was, when the committee is going to meet, when the committee's recommendations are going to be taken to the Board of Trustees. will get the bad news letter almost the same day as other people are getting the good news letter. As you move away from organizations that are highly formalized like that into smaller foundations, for example, you may not. And in that case, you should call and find out what happened. Again, that's the good time to have your skin as thick as it can be and be not defensive, because even in that call, you might learn something about whether there was enough traction there to revise and resubmit, in effect. Okay, cool. It's been a pleasure. It used to be that when we had meetings like this at the beginning of graduate student careers, we talked to the new cohort of our colleagues and peers about the academic world, and we explained the whole problem of what was then called publish or perish. And I know that that phrase is still out there in a variety of contexts, and it still applies, because in the final analysis, the sharing of our findings, of our contributions to science, is a fundamental obligation. So you still have to publish or perish. But now we've added a new one. We haven't quite figured out the really cool cliche that sounds as good as publish or perish. My personal favorite at the moment is get grants or get gone. But it is an analogous set of expectations. Try not hard to fear it. Try rather to embrace it, because there are parts of it that are hugely joyful, and that joy outweighs the frustration, at least it has in my career.